Introduction. Are you your own worst enemy? Most people say they have goals. Some want more money, others a better job, while some seek more happiness in their relationships. Despite those good intentions and people's best efforts to make choices that will improve their lives, their biggest obstacle remains themselves. They want to get better, they want to take things to the next level, yet few people achieve the success and happiness they desire simply because they can't get out of their own way and they don't understand why. When I was 24, this was exactly my problem. I was a top-performing sales rep and had transitioned into what I thought was a dream job leading a new field office. I did what I thought I was supposed to do, dive into work and make money. And for a little while, things were going well. I was making very good money, but after working 110 hours a week for a couple of years straight, I burned out and hit rock bottom. By October 2010, I had lost all the money I had put into the company I was trying to build. And although I watched it all happen in real time, I felt powerless to change my behavior. I did a lot of soul-searching and realized that underneath my behavior was the fear of not being enough. This limiting belief was rooted in my past. I grew up with an alcoholic father whose disease caused him to put me in dangerous situations on more than one occasion. Even when I wasn't in immediate danger, I always felt like I came second in his life, after alcohol. He died when I was 15, and it took me years to realize the emotional toll his alcoholism had taken on me. Only later did I understand that I was trying to succeed not for myself, but so that I could finally prove that I was worthy of the love that I never felt from him. If I was ever going to achieve my version of success or happiness, I needed to get in touch with my passion and better understand what I wanted out of life. There was one part of my sales job that I loved, and that was being able to make an impact on the younger employees I train. That's what gave me the most fulfillment. I knew that I was an excellent listener. I had wanted to be a psychologist for a long time, and the parts of my job that I enjoyed the most were the parts that resembled being a psychologist. I may have lost the money I had earned, but nobody could take away the knowledge I had built up over the years. I realized that I could tell people my story, and maybe they could find inspiration in it and do the same. That was the birth of my podcast, The Mindset Mentor. I didn't know what I was doing or whether this whole experiment would work, but I didn't care. I didn't worry about going viral or how to monetize any of my content. I focused only on trying to help people by talking about all of the different things that helped me. I treated it like a diary at first. I would say what I needed to say to myself. I was an open book. No subject was off limits, and I was as vulnerable as possible. I had learned that healing was only possible when letting those emotions go. It wasn't easy at first, and I made mistakes, but I didn't give up. I stuck with it, adjusted, and got better. I've since gone on to record more than 1,300 podcasts and have over 200 million podcast downloads. Today, I run 2 companies, a school that helps business owners grow and scale their businesses, and the Mindset Mentor, which includes my podcast and self-development classes. My clients and listeners are all looking for wisdom, tools, and strategies that will help them find success in the most important areas of their lives: business, relationships, health, money, family, and more. After coaching thousands of people, I've learned that most of them know exactly what they need to do to achieve their goals and become successful. Whether they want to lose weight, make more money, or have better relationships, figuring out what they need to do isn't the problem. That information is out there and readily available, but they aren't doing it. Why? It's because they don't know how to take the action required to get started. Taking action is not what causes problems, it's what fixes them. I don't know anyone who has more problems because they took the action required to get the life they want. The harsh reality is that you cannot change your life unless you commit to deciding what that first step is and taking it. This book is for those people who know they have potential but aren't realizing that potential or making the impact they know they can make on the world. This is a book for those who have tried multiple times to get going, and probably made some excellent progress right out of the gate but suddenly found themselves struggling to drum up the motivation to keep at it. The diet and exercise routine didn't stick, or maybe that business plan never materialized. After feeling so good at first, they got derailed, discouraged, and were left thinking it was impossible to get what they wanted. The problem is that most people are looking for that one key that will unlock success, but it doesn't exist. There is no magic word that will make all your dreams come true. Success is not one big event that changes your life. Success comes from the accumulation of many small actions, what I call micro-actions, that you take every single day. The state of your relationships, the amount of money you have in the bank, and your career trajectory are all a result of the micro-actions you took in the past. That means your future will be determined by the micro-actions you take from here on out. It's not about being the best, it's about being better than you were yesterday. You can't compare yourself to other people. When you go to bed at night, the only thing that matters is that you improved that day. It's about showing up for yourself through the action you take today. Success comes from the accumulation of many small actions, what I call micro-actions, that you take every single day. Fortunately, yesterday is over, and you have a choice between things being hard now and easy later, or easy now and hard later. Pick one, because nobody gets through life without some bumps, bruises, and a few scars. Doing hard things can be painful, both physically and emotionally, but guess what? That's good because your pain is a stimulus for growth. When you go to the gym, you need to break down your muscles so they can grow back stronger. Your brain works the same way. You need to push through that discomfort and get out of your comfort zone to grow and change. The trick is not giving yourself a choice. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu wrote about the need for armies to burn their boats and bridges after arriving on enemy shores because soldiers without the option of retreat are more likely to fight to victory. This was a technique used by Alexander the Great, Spanish Captain Hernán Cortés, and several other military leaders who recognized the importance of going all in. You want to do the same. Fully commit. Once you're on board, this process begins by identifying why you haven't been taking action and then clearing the runway. Once you learn what's holding you back, you can then remove the obstacles standing in your way to begin implementing the tiny micro-action, rituals, and habits that will get you moving in the direction you want to go. It's important also to understand the science of the brain. What's incredible is that as you lean into taking action, your brain actually starts to change. The brain has the ability to adapt by forming and reorganizing synaptic connections, called neuroplasticity, and with the work you put in on the front end, these new connections in your brain will make taking consistent action easier, so this change will stick. I've found taking action comes down to 6 steps, and if you follow these 6 steps when pursuing a goal, you will see results. The 6 steps are focus, work, persist, rest, reward, repeat. We'll go through each step together in the following chapters and review them in the epilogue. Through trial and error, I've learned what works and what doesn't. But this isn't a book about only me, and I don't rely only on anecdotal evidence. It tells the story of the clients I've coached through the same issues you're experiencing right now. The most common challenges are related to diet, fitness, money, business, and relationships, so those are primary examples I provide. But this same approach can work no matter what the challenge you're trying to overcome or the goal you hope to achieve. In addition to strategies and tips on how to incorporate these concepts into your daily life, I cite the science that supports what I've learned from the experts I've interviewed on my podcast. This process requires a mindset shift, and a better understanding of how your brain works makes the shift much easier, but that's a complicated subject. As author and speaker Tony Robbins once said on my podcast, complexity is the enemy of execution, so I've set out to make this information as simple and straightforward as possible. I've also included journal prompts at the end of each chapter. These will help you better understand the process and push you forward, while also helping you see how much you've already changed. For more journal prompts and video lessons from this book, go to robdial.com/levelup. Life is pretty simple. Either you achieve your goals or you don't. The difference almost always comes down to whether you take the action necessary to get what you want. That's the missing link for so many people, but this book provides a simple step-by-step blueprint to help you take the action required every single day so that you can create the life that you want. That is how you level up. And you don't have to wait. This is a process you will begin immediately. Let's go get things done. Life is pretty simple. Either you achieve your goals or you don't. Part of why you're not taking action. This book is filled with strategies to help you create the life you want, but none of that matters if you can't get past what is holding you back from taking action in the first place. In Part I, we take a look under the hood of the car to understand why, despite your best efforts and strongest wishes, you haven't been taking action, or in some cases, sustaining the action long enough. The answer boils down to 3 main reasons: fear, the story you're telling yourself, and the lack of a clear purpose. The first step is understanding the nature of fear and how most of what you're scared of isn't real, which we'll explore in Chapter 1. You say that you want to do something but then immediately persuade yourself that you can't do it. You might be scared of failure or not being good enough. You might be scared of what people think. Ultimately, you're scared of a future that hasn't happened yet, so you do what's safe. Nothing. You take yourself out of the race before you even start. Once you learn that those fears aren't real, you can take that first step outside of your comfort zone, which is where true change occurs. The second step is confronting the story that is constantly running in the back of your mind, and this is where we'll go in Chapter 2. You probably don't even know the story is there most of the time. Everything you've experienced over the years has been stored in your brain, forming a story about who you believe you are. You have become a character. That character is your identity, and it's very convincing in telling you what you can and can't do. The good news is that character is a story you made up. It's not real, so you can change it. And I will teach you how to change your story so it will no longer hold you back. Once you can properly identify fear for what it is and change the story you're telling yourself, you must define exactly what it is you want, which we'll explore in Chapter 3. Like most people, I'm sure you have a vague idea. You might want to lose weight or make more money, but what does that mean? You can't hit a target you can't see, so get specific. When your goals are crystal clear, you will feel pulled toward the future you want, and visualization, which we will discuss in Chapter 4, can help accelerate that process. When you reach that point, you will be primed and ready to take action. But let's start at the beginning. What are you scared of? Chapter 1. Fear. None of it is real. I am terrified of spiders, and I can link that fear back to my sister. The movie Arachnophobia was a horror comedy that came out in 1990, starring John Goodman and Jeff Daniels. It was about a small town that was invaded by a rare and very dangerous species of spider. When I was 5, my older sister described scenes from the movie in such vivid detail that it scared the absolute hell out of me. 2 scenes in particular stand out. The first was when a spider caught fire and chased after someone. I can't think of anything that sounds scarier than that, except for maybe the second scene she described, where a spider crawled into the toilet right before one of the characters entered the bathroom and sat on the toilet without looking inside first. For the next 3 years, I made sure to thoroughly check the toilet before I sat down. I'm still terrified of spiders, but how is this possible? My fear of spiders is not my fear. It didn't even come from the movie because I never watched it. I learned this fear from my sister. And if a fear that fierce could be built into me by another person, how many other fears have I picked up over the years from friends, family, and society in general? The answer is probably most of them. The thing is, fear is natural. It tells us when we might need to pay attention and be cautious about something. But not all fears are equal, so how do we know which fears are worth paying attention to? Which fears are real and which are imagined? I turned to psychologists, gurus, and neurobiologists, and after going into every nook and cranny to study fear, I was surprised to learn that human beings are born with only 2 fears: the fear of falling, the fear of loud noises. These are the only fears that are built into our brain circuitry, and they emerge as soon as we are born. In 1960, Eleanor J. Gibson and Richard D. Walk at Cornell University conducted the visual cliff experiment with infants between 6 and 14 months old when they discovered that even when the children were called by their mothers, almost all of the infants would not crawl out over a heavy glass that was designed to look like a cliff. Instinctually, even babies were scared of falling. Meanwhile, the fear of loud noises, or what has become known as the acoustic startle response, is a defense mechanism or a warning of potential danger designed to keep us safe too. These 2 fears are innate to almost all humans, regardless of the culture we were born into. But how do we know that fear is a behavior that can be so easily learned? In 1919, John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner at Johns Hopkins University conducted what became known as the Little Albert experiment. 9-month-old Albert was exposed to numerous objects and animals, including a white rat, to which he exhibited no fear. 2 months later, the researchers isolated Albert with only the rat, and every time he went to touch the rat, they struck a steel bar with a hammer, creating a loud noise that startled Albert and caused him to cry. They did this repeatedly, and eventually Albert became distressed and fearful at the mere sight of the rat. He went from having no fear of the rat to being terrified of the rat. It's no surprise that this experiment has since been criticized for being unethical, but it opened the door to further research on how fears can be learned. If the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises are the only 2 innate fears that we're born with, this means that every single other fear is learned. They come from our environment, and we pick them up by watching and listening to our friends, family, and what's happening around us in our society. If your parents are afraid of people judging them, there is a good chance you might have that same fear, too. I've spent a lot of time discussing fear with my clients and how it can prevent them from taking action. Over time, I saw patterns develop and realized that people's inability to take action could be traced back to the same 5 fears. Almost every fear is a version of one of these fears. Fear of failure, this is the fear that you won't reach your goals. It can lead to your being indecisive and procrastinating. You might even tell people you're going to fail just to keep expectations low. The fear of failure is also referred to as atychiphobia. Fear of rejection, this is a fear of people telling you no or turning you down. It can be personal or professional. It's a fear of other people's opinions and judgment. Social anxiety can fall into this category. Fear of success, this is a fear of getting what you want. It's often rooted in the fear of change and can lead to self-sabotage. Fear of success has also been referred to as backlash avoidance, and it can alienate you from those you care about most. Fear of being a fraud, this is the fear of being exposed as a fraud, or the fear that you aren't good enough. Fear of abandonment, this is a fear of being left all alone, or that you might do or say something to drive away those you care the most about. This fear is often referred to as autophobia. Each of these fears comes down to one thought: I am not enough, and because I am not enough, I will never be loved. If you are afraid of being too busy, notice how you're actually afraid that you're not capable enough to handle it all. Or maybe you're worried that you're going to negatively influence your children, which is really a fear of not being a good enough parent. Maybe it's the thought of running out of money that keeps you up at night, which is rooted in a fear that you aren't good enough to provide for yourself or your family. The list goes on. We want to fit in and be accepted. We want to feel loved, and ultimately these fears boil down to our not feeling like we are good enough to be loved. What is your biggest fear that holds you back from taking action? To answer that, you must first understand what fear is. The 2 types of fear at its core. Fear is a defense mechanism. It derives from the amygdala, which is the fear processing region of the brain. 2 million years ago, the actions of the amygdala kept our species alive by helping us fear things that might happen in the future, such as being killed by a wild animal, so that we could avoid dangerous situations. While our environment has changed over the past 2 million years, our brain hasn't changed much at all. Have you ever been sitting around on a beautiful day, drinking your coffee and feeling that life is good, when, out of nowhere, you're hit with a pang of fear? The reason is because things are going so well that the brain creates something to be afraid of to keep you protected. Really, that's what it does. The amygdala has nothing to do, so it creates fears when no actual danger exists. It's doing what it was designed to do, but today that holds us back from getting what we truly want. Once we become aware of this, we can work to get past those fears. It starts by learning that all fears can be broken down into two categories: primal fears and intellectual fears. Fear is a defense mechanism. Primal fears are attached to the expectation of future physical pain or death. These fears aren't as common for us today, but every so often we do experience them. If you've ever gone camping and had to venture outside the safety of the campsite in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, that flood of anxiety you may feel is a primal fear. It's warning you of potential danger to keep you alive, but in our everyday lives, death isn't lurking around every corner as it once was. We have food, clothing, shelter, and people who care about us. In my house, I'm safe from the elements and can survive for a very long time. Even when we aren't in physical danger, the amygdala will still try to do its job, which is how we develop the second type of fear. Intellectual fears are not related to the fears of physical pain or death, but our amygdala continues to see predators everywhere. Instead of lions, crocodiles, and bears, however, predators derive from the list we discussed above: the fears of failure, rejection, success, being seen as a fraud, and abandonment. We worry about whether we're good enough, smart enough, or attractive enough. We worry about what people will think of us and whether they will say no to what we ask of them. We worry about whether we're likable or whether we're going to fit in, but none of these fears is linked to physical pain or death. What real danger is there in rejection? You will not die from any of these things, but it doesn't matter if it's rejection or survival. Our brains and bodies react the same way to intellectual fears as they do to primal fears. These two types of fear can cause the same feeling inside your body. Primal fears are serving a function and are rational, while intellectual fears are neither, but the amygdala doesn't know the difference. It's as if we're walking through life and toward our goals wearing a foggy pair of glasses, and that fog is the fear preventing us from seeing things clearly. A brain left to its own devices will almost always go negative. And since the brain can't tell the difference between primal and intellectual fears, that responsibility falls to you. Becoming more aware of fears is like building a muscle. The more you work it, the better you will get at rooting out those fears. You do that by identifying where fears come from, admitting that they aren't yours, and releasing them. But there is one trick that can help change your perspective. Don't try to get rid of your fear, learn to embrace it. It doesn't surprise me that one of the most common questions my clients ask me is, how do I get rid of my fear? I get it. Who doesn't want to learn how to overcome their fears? But the answer is, you can't overcome something that doesn't exist. That's right. Every single one of your fears isn't real. Don't believe me? Look over that list of common fears and consider your own. Are any of those fears coming to fruition in this moment? No. Author and consultant Carl Albrecht defined fear as an anxious feeling, caused by our anticipation of some imagined event or experience. The key word in that definition is imagined. That feeling of fear is a biological reaction to what we're thinking, not what's happening. We are making up a future in our mind that does not exist, and that future is almost always negative. It's a way that we protect ourselves. Will your new business fail in the future? It's true that not every business is successful, and even those that are often have setbacks, but the point is to focus on the present, not an imagined future. Your new business has not failed today, so there is nothing to be afraid of right now. Many people are scared of success, even ambitious people who want to succeed. One of my clients grew up in a small, religious, middle-class town. Most of the people he knew were teachers and farmers who didn't make more than $60,000 a year. As he grew older, he feared that if he became too successful and made too much money, people in that community would view him differently and he would no longer be accepted. It's a fear of not fitting in, which is another version of the fear of abandonment. This fear is common because as tribal beings, none of us wants to feel lonely. We want to fit in and be accepted. Getting kicked out of the tribe once meant certain death, so it's natural to think that if we grow out of where we came from, we won't be accepted, and people will see us as an enemy. I can say with certainty that I've never known anyone who has become a successful millionaire to turn around and say, now all of my friends hate me. Cornell University published a study showing that 85% of what we worry about never happens. And of those 15% of worries that do occur, 79% of the participants handled what occurred better than they expected. Some even learned a lesson. Do the math, 97% of our worries never materialize. In other words, our worries are baseless and derive from our unfounded pessimistic perception. So, why are we using our mental energy worrying about nothing when we could use it to take action and be productive? Do the math, 97% of our worries never materialize. As human beings, we have such complex and beautiful imaginations, but if we are not in control of those imaginations, they can get out of hand and create so many fears within us. We can control these fears, however, once we realize that almost all of them are as real as the bogeyman. We're masters of creating monsters in the form of fake circumstances and stories that could occur in our future. We then become terrified of that future even though it doesn't exist. How crazy is that? If you are a worrier or someone who focuses on the negative, don't get stuck here. My goal is to help you develop strategies to harness your mental energy so you can do the things you want to do without fear holding you back. One trick is to turn fear on its head and use it to your advantage. One of my first mentors taught me that very little in life is worse than the pain of regret and the feeling of getting to the end of your life and realizing that you wasted time. That stuck with me, so after watching my father die from alcoholism, I didn't worry about failure, abandonment, or not being good enough. Instead, I developed a fear of getting to the end of my life and realizing that there wasn't any more time, or that I had wasted my potential. That fear has motivated me to take action. You can do the same thing, adopt the fear of getting to the end of your life and wishing you had done more. This fear will propel you toward the future you want. Fear is powerful, so embrace it and find a way to use it to your advantage. What future pain are you trying to avoid? When studying this topic, I had an aha moment and had to turn off the music and all the other distractions in the room. I realized that fear arises from an image in our brain of future pain. With a primal fear, that pain is physical pain or death. With an intellectual fear, that pain is emotional pain. This is super important. Every fear is about the brain trying to avoid future pain. What is the future pain that your fear is trying to get you to avoid? Fear arises from an image in our brain of future pain. Every fear is about the brain trying to avoid future pain. For many people, this fear of future pain is the source of procrastination. When I ask my clients why they aren't taking action, many of them say, "I'm procrastinating." Yes, that might be true, but what they don't realize is that procrastination is a symptom and not the cause when it comes to their inability to take action. The cause is they're trying to avoid a fear by running away from it. Many people who put off building their business, implementing a workout routine, or taking the action required to accomplish their goals do so because they are unconsciously scared of failing. What makes these fears debilitating is that they can prevent you from taking action. Intellectual fears change the way you feel, and how you feel is important because if you don't feel good, it's more difficult to take action. If you're not taking the action necessary to start or grow your business because you're scared of failing, that fear is holding you back. You're creating the feeling of having a failed business even though the business has not failed. If you're imagining pain in the future, why bother taking action at all? So, you avoid action to avoid the pain. Tens of thousands of years ago when humans lived in caves, this fear was a defense mechanism that helped keep us alive. If we knew that we could get killed by a wild animal if we ventured outside the cave in the middle of the night, then maybe we decided to stay in the cave until the sun was up. It served a very important purpose back then, but does it serve us today when we're trying to live up to our potential? Absolutely not, because that unwanted future becomes the source of negative energy. It's what prevents us from taking action because who wants to work toward a future that sucks? What most people never learn is that life doesn't have to be like this. Life is too short to spend it scared, angry, anxious, sad, worried, or bogged down with negative emotion. But people act as if their brains are like a piece of concrete. They've absorbed certain fears or ideas about themselves and believe that if they've been that way all of their lives, they will be that way forever. But that's not true. You can control your brain and overcome the way it naturally defaults to the negative. That's what I'm going to teach you how to do in part 3. Life is too short to spend it scared, angry, anxious, sad, worried, or bogged down with negative emotions. I know this sounds simple, but dealing with it isn't easy. I always say that you can't read the label when you're in the jar. In other words, when we're in our heads, it's difficult to understand why we feel the way we feel and why we act the way we act. We must get out of our heads for a moment to see ourselves as if we're a different person and try to work out why that person feels the way they do. Why is that person not taking action? What is that person afraid of? It's so easy to fool ourselves and give in to those intellectual fears because they feel so real. It can be overwhelming and even crippling, but it's our job to identify that fear for what it is. It's not real. You want an imagined fear to prevent you from taking the action necessary to get the future you want. It's your job to make the distinction between real and imagined fear at all costs. You must learn how to become extremely self-aware of what you're feeling. The closer you look, the more you'll start to realize that you spend far too much time thinking about what you don't want, and not nearly enough time thinking about what you do want. But believe it or not, you have the choice. It's like saying, I can choose to think about all the amazing things that could happen in the future, or I can choose to think about how I'm not worth it and send myself into a mini depression. You know what? Mini depression sounds good. I'm going to go with that one again. It sounds funny to say it like that, but how often do you choose to think about a negative future? Every thought produces a chemical reaction in your brain that creates a feeling or emotion. We've all experienced this. Whenever you have a sexual thought, for instance, that creates a very specific feeling in your body. If your brain is going to imagine your future and your body is going to feel whatever you think, why not make a conscious choice to think about a future that doesn't suck? Picture an awesome future in which you're inspired and successful. Think of how amazing your children will be instead of fearing that you're messing them up. Instead of thinking about all the ways your new business might not succeed, put that energy and focus into what needs to be done for you to be successful. Better yet, think about what it will feel like when you get there. Try thinking of this another way. Let's say that you really have to go to the bathroom, but I tell you that a lion is in the tub. You won't want to take the action necessary to go to the bathroom. You're safe where you are, and you know it's not safe in the bathroom, so you will do whatever is necessary to avoid going into the bathroom as long as you know that lion is in there. The same thing happens if you're imagining a future that sucks. You're fearing all the things that could go wrong, and because the brain doesn't know the difference between primal and intellectual fears, you're feeling those feelings of that fake future, so of course you don't want to work toward that future because it sucks. Now, if I told you that outside your door right now is a pizza, a glass of wine, a puppy, or whatever you love and makes you happy, you would race out that door to get it, right? The same thing happens when thinking about a positive future. We'll dive more deeply into this concept in Chapter 4, but notice the difference. Your brain will produce the chemicals necessary to trick your body into believing that future success is happening the same way it will produce the chemical that make you feel those intellectual fears are happening right now. Thoughts create feelings, and how you feel will make it either easier or harder to take action. Taking action will be difficult at first, but you have to practice because the more you do it, the easier it gets. And with fewer fears holding you back, the easier it will be to take action. The more you try to fight it, the more you welcome what it is you fear. Fear is designed to help you avoid future pain, but it causes you to imagine pain in your future, which prevents you from taking action. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you don't take action, future pain is inevitable. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm trying to be honest with you. Everything comes at a cost. Eventually, the result of not taking action will catch up to you, whether it's not living up to your potential, not following your heart, not giving your children the opportunities you want for them, or lying in your death bed and realizing that you wasted your life. By the time you realize what's happened, it might be too late. Eventually, the result of not taking action will catch up to you. The only thing you can do to avoid pain is take action now toward the future you want. Will it be hard? Yes. Will you struggle? Yes. Will you mess up? Yes. But it will be worth it.